Alright, so Melissa McCarthy made another damn movie with her husband, so if you thought Tammy and Life of the Party and The Boss were like the height of her comedic talent, then this is probably the kind of thing you're looking for. And it starts off with a genius premise of having the protagonist of the movie be the so-called most average person on Earth. It's already a winning idea, isn't it? Who's being stalked by this superintelligence that can see through every possible camera and various outlet or whatever, and has chosen her to possibly what? So it seems to be doing some kind of experiment about humanity, but then there's also the possibility that this might lead to her saving the world from this thing if she can prove that humanity is worth saving or something. The tone is clearly, immediately level. So, and of course, and you hear the criticism thrown at McCarthy, particularly in her comedies, when they're not made by Paul Feig, specifically Spy being the outlier in this, as the one time that her comedic strengths seemed to be really used in a way that wasn't just like one thing. I'm almost like looking at the track record now. I'm really surprised Ben Falcone didn't also direct Identity Thief, because it's right there also. But the thing that seems to be most criticized about Melissa McCarthy's approach to comedy in regards to her bad movies are like the constant pratfalls. And I swear to God, not 5 minutes in, like this movie hasn't even been on for 5 minutes, and she does not one but three pratfalls involving a beanbag chair. That's the start of it. And then we get this whole exposition thing about her ex, Bobby Cannavale, and how they just broke up, and she's in like a slump emotionally, which I guess is part of making her the most average person on Earth or whatever. So really, they just keep building and building. This is going to be one of the most boring protagonists of all time, and that's the point of the movie. So that all this other shit can happen around her, and she can just react to it in over-the-top ways or whatever. Or not. I don't even know if it's trying to be over the top. It's just kind of here, existing. But we do get help from one of the many exposition machines throughout this movie, which is Brian Tyree Henry, which, is... He's amazing on Atlanta. He had that one amazing scene in A Beale Street Could Talk. He's done so much great stuff in such a small amount of time already. So yeah, let's throw him into this idiotic comedy and make him an exposition machine. That's a really great idea. Now, as far as like the concept itself, about the whole idea of all of the smart objects, sort of being able to spy on one person and have a plan in regards to this person, really has horror movie written all over it. But I don't really know what the hell genre this wants to be. Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? Is it sci-fi? Is it romance? Is it an end-of-the-world thing? It's trying to be all five of those. Kind of, after a while, all at once. And I don't really know... I didn't even really know what to make of it for a while. It seemed a little inoffensive to start off with, but then as it went on, it just kind of got worse. And pretty much what you would expect from the collaborations of McCarthy and Falcone. So, and like we've talked about before, one of the main problems with this just right away is the fact that when two people are married, if a husband is directing a comedy that stars his wife, there's not really going to be much that this director will want to really cut out, because if you're in love with the star, you're going to think every single thing that they do is hilarious. I would assume, anyway. So if we go through all this dialogue that just feels like bad improv, Apatow syndrome, it's just all going to stick around because it all looks good to the director. But I don't know, apparently there's not another higher up that's putting a stop to this. They just trust that this formula will still work, and given the audience these usually go for, yeah, that's what I was saying. If you like Tammy or Life of the Party or something, or The Boss, then you will probably think this is fine. I don't know if this is as bad as The Boss or Life of the Party, but it's close. Like, they're all pretty much there together anyway. And none of this is really helped by the fact that the whole joke is that James Corden is the voice of the superintelligence. There's kind of there's multiple layers to that. Like, not only is it actually just James Corden talking, but the joke is that she knows that it's James Corden's voice, and something about she's like obsessed with Corden. She's like the president of his fan club or something. So she finds his voice soothing. Now, I don't want to offend anybody, but I mean, it's like, if you were looking for a soothing voice, I don't know that James Corden is the person you would seek out. It almost seems like it'd be a joke in itself, but it's kind of hard to tell if they're even going in that direction or not, because the rest of it is basically just literally like James Corden based humor. And I don't mean humor coming from the character voiced by James Corden. I mean humor that relates to the actual James Corden in the context of everything else. Like the fact that he does the carpool karaoke thing. So, and I remember Tammy especially having a lot of this shit. And Identity Thief had this shit. It's one of the trademarks of Melissa McCarthy's bad movies, and that is the singing in the car bullshit. But even outside of Melissa McCarthy movies, we've talked about how, like way in the past, about how the singing in the car scene in comedies is just about the laziest filler you can find. But every now and then, there's a Tommy Boy that comes along that does it perfectly. But it's like, but now that those movies come along, it's like everybody wants to have the singing in the car scene from Tommy Boy in their movie, but it's just not gonna be the same. It's just, I don't even know why people are still trying the singing in the car comedy bit. I think Malin Ackerman did it a lot in The Heartbreak Kid as well, and we saw how that turned out. So it's a fucking dead trope, but Melissa McCarthy is hell-bent on trying to keep it alive for some reason. But, so we get that, and I think they even used the same song more than once, so that's the same dated song at that. And every now and then it had some idea that came in, or something that it did where it was like, okay, that's going a little bit against what I thought they might do. Like, the whole idea that it would seem like the superintelligence can only communicate with her, so there's going to be scenes where she's just talking out loud and she looks insane or whatever. But it's quickly established that the superintelligence is willing to talk to anybody. So I guess there's that. But then there's this whole confusing bit where we had the whole explanation that the reason it's James Corden's voice is because it chose that voice because Corden comforts her specifically. Otherwise, it's just like a generic, garbled voice or whatever. But the voices change throughout depending on the person. Like for Brian Tyree Henry, for instance, it's Octavia Spencer, who's here for like one line, and then the rest is like archived dialogue from The Help. And I was like, I assumed like most of it had to be archived dialogue, but she's actually credited in the credits, so there's that. But the thing though is that what shows you that this is just it's really going all in on the few jokes that it has. We get this whole scene of Brian Tyree Henry at a board meeting, and McCarthy's not here. McCarthy's not even in this scene. But the superintelligence is still talking to him and the boardroom as James Corden. Number one, you'd think, because Brian Tyree Henry's kind of at the front of this room, it'd be Octavia Spencer, but Octavia Spencer was just here to say one line. They otherwise, hired Corden, so fuck everything else, fuck what this movie has going on. We hired Corden, so it's gotta be Corden talking. So, shit like that. It just shows how little care went into this. They just had a couple of things where they were like, wouldn't it be funny if this, one joke was this thing, and then it's just, well, let's just stick to that. Like, if we find it funny once, audiences are going to find it funny for a whole fucking movie. The same thing goes for, like, I was talking about that Corden-based humor, where there's all the references to that, and they go off on whole tangents about Corden's career, like, side characters, like cops are going off on side tangents about James Corden's career. But then there's the whole thing where there's a ton of references to shit. This is one of those movies that is just riddled with that shit, where they make a reference to something, but they're, like, terrified the audience has no idea what they're talking about, so they have to just blatantly say the thing. Like when they do the Law and Order noise is something that the Superintelligence does when he talks to the cops, because hilarious, and the movie loves that joke, apparently. Um, Despite the fact that everybody knows what that sound is, Melissa McCarthy just has to say, wait a minute, is that the Law and Order sound? Audience, are you still with us? With that really fucking obvious joke, and that's the thing, like there's a War Games reference where somebody has to say, oh my god, that's like in War Games. Or they do the, like there's obviously, because the Superintelligence eventually ends up in a car, there's going to be a Knight Rider reference, to which Melissa McCarthy has to say, oh, this is like Knight Rider. And just on and on and on. The Help reference felt that way, too. So, all that shit. And yeah, and of course, you know, they love their own jokes so much that the very last joke in the entire movie is, like, the Law and Order thing happens in the middle of the movie. Like, in the early middle of the movie. And the very, very last joke of the movie, as it cuts to the black screen before the credits roll, is the Law and Order thing again. And it's like, just the arrogance it takes to commit to a bad joke like that. To be so certain that that stupid, lazy joke is so goddamn funny that that's the note you go out on. It pretty much says everything about this movie, as it is. And as far as them, you know, wasting the side cast, Bobby Cannavale's here eventually, and he is the Estranged Ex, obviously, and Bobby Cannavale just kind of has this charm that's going to come through regardless of the product of the movie. But they're doing everything they can to make his character so fucking weird. Because we kind of get the idea that, like, the way they interact and the way she's, like, super awkward and he's just kind of living his life, and it seems to be implied that he's the one that caused the breakup. It's almost like maybe McCarthy's character feels like she's out of his league or something. But then we have these scenes where he's, like, smelling his groceries, and he's almost childlike in many ways. It's weird. And it's like he doesn't know how to behave in public, but there's not really anything they do with that. Like, it's not really leading to some sort of payoff or anything. That's just, I guess, the joke of his character, because they didn't know what else to do. So, I don't know. But then, as I was talking about, we do have Brian Tyree Henry here as... we're wasting him for the most part as an exposition machine, but then he gets this one moment, though, where the Superintelligence kind of proves what it is to him by diving into his past traumas. And he has, like, a real dramatic moment. Like, a real dramatic moment. To the point that it's weirdly out of place, but I mean, well acted, because he's good. But then the rest of his performance is comedic, or it's supposed to be comedic. But the trouble is that in this case, in his comedic scenes, he's exuding this awkwardness. And that's the one joke of his character, because you can't do a Melissa McCarthy movie without every single character being one joke that's driven into the ground, and never really worked in the first place. But they're going to keep trying through the whole runtime, hoping at some point that it lands, but it never will, because we've seen the others. But the problem with that is that when you see Brian Tyree Henry's other comedic performances in the past, he's so good at reacting to awkwardness. And that seems to be a real strength of his. So to put him on the other side of that and make him the awkward one, and I'm all for, you know, switching it up, but it's just so clearly not working, and it's so clear that he should be on the other side of this character. Like, this is the kind of character where all the other characters he's played, like Paperboy, would just look so fucking annoyed with this guy. And that's, yeah. And so, like I was saying, this goes on, and then it does, there's the whole, and here's the thing, is all this stuff is so distracting to the point that the whole premise of the movie is what most of it is, which is the Superintelligence, you know, making shit happen to where he's trying to get her to hook up with Bobby Cannavale again. That's basically what the whole movie is. So he's giving her a bunch of money, he's showing up in all of her things. We get a few shots of Corden that's actually Corden, like when she's walking through the store and he's on like a screen talking to her. Once again, because they paid Corden, they need to have him here in as many forms as possible, even when it makes no sense. And they've completely set up that the opposite should be happening. Corden will still be there. So there's that. And like I said, the whole premise of the movie also is that we're trying to follow around and worry about the most average person on Earth, as they say. And that's like, what do you do with that? Like, that's just shooting yourself in the foot before the movie even fucking starts, because she just kind of stays that way. She stays painfully average. The whole story is her being awkward with the Cannon Valley and him being awkward in return, and it's just that. And then suddenly it's an end of the world movie. It's like the end of fucking Knowing. Suddenly he came into this, where there's like a solar flare thing, or the solar flare thing is like a cover up, and the voice goes back to the sinister voice instead of Corden, but it's like, it's just never, it never feels dire. But you would think it shouldn't matter too much if it feels dire, because it's a comedy at the end of the day. But it takes its shit so seriously when it's just picking random genres, like out of a hat, at random times to do. It's like watching a Whose Line Is It Anyway game with the fucking genres. And it's, that actually is a Whose Line Is It Anyway game, actually. So, that's, I don't know what the hell this wants to be. But, as we can clearly see, you know, Melissa McCarthy and Ben Falcone obviously make a really nice couple. They seem extremely happily married, and it's great that they can work together, make all these projects together. But good God, it is like the first sign that something's going to be absolute shit, at least up to this point. So, this clearly hasn't changed that. Like I said, we're pretty much still on the same level as, like, Life of the Party and The Boss, which is about as low as comedy can get. So, yeah. So we're still here. So, we'll see what else can happen. I'm sure she's got another comedy coming down the road soon, and it's really just a flip of a coin, I guess, in regards to its quality, unless Ben Falcone's directing, in which case it will be shit. Guaranteed. So, that's, I guess, where we can leave this. We're going to continue on down this thing, and then, and as we get later into the month, we'll get stuff that's, you know, bigger and awards friendly and stuff like that. And then we'll go into all that award stuff as well eventually. So, until all that stuff, I think that's it.